Good day everyone. Welcome to the Azure Data Factory Series. In today's video, we are diving into mastering service endpoints for enhanced security. Whether you are looking to secure your data transfers or simply curious about service endpoints, you are in the right place. But before we get started, if you find value in this content, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us and it helps us continue bringing you quality content. Let's get started. Service endpoints are a feature in Azure that allow you to extend your virtual network to secure specific Azure services such as Azure Storage directly within the VNet. They enable you to connect to an Azure service using its public endpoint, but with the traffic securely flowing within Azure backbone network instead of going through the public network. Let's discuss some of the advantages of service endpoints. Service endpoints provide secure connectivity to Azure services by extending your VNet's private address space, preventing exposure to the internet, thus improving the security. They allow you to access Azure services without the need for complex networking setups like VPNs or ExpressRoute, and this simplifies network architecture. There are no additional costs are incurred for setting up service endpoints beyond the standard VNet and service costs, thus proving to be highly cost effective. It's easy to implement as service endpoints are straightforward to configure, requiring minimal changes to your existing infrastructure. Because traffic remains within Azure backbone network, latency is greatly reduced compared to using public internet routes. Now that we spoke about the advantages, let's discuss some of the disadvantages of service endpoints. Service endpoints are limited to Azure services. Service endpoints only work with certain Azure services, so they may not be suitable if you need to secure access to other resources. Service endpoints do not provide you as much control over the traffic as private endpoints do. Yeah, all traffic to the service from VNet is allowed by default. That's something that you need to understand. Like you have a VNet and you have several subnets within that, and also like in case if there is any other VNet that is peered to this VNet, all by default will have access to that particular resources if service endpoint is created. Yeah, let's discuss when to deploy service endpoint in production. It is just my understanding, but yeah, with all these information you can decide if this is an appropriate choice for your production deployment. Yeah, service endpoints are ideal for production environments when you need secure low latency connectivity to Azure services without the complexity of a private endpoint. Yeah, cost is a consideration and you want to avoid the additional expenses associated with the private endpoints. One thing that you need to keep in mind is like private endpoint is the recommended way of connecting all your resources. Yeah, that's the recommended way. Your application architecture is straightforward and the use case doesn't require the enhanced security or access control that private endpoint offers. Yeah, so now let's compare service endpoint with the private endpoint. Yeah, let's first discuss how service endpoints are better than private endpoints. Yeah, it is easier and quicker to implement. Yeah, service endpoints requires fewer configurations and are easier to manage. Yeah, there are no additional costs. That's the most important thing that the service endpoint is going to offer you. Unlike private endpoints, service endpoints don't incur extra charges beyond your standard VNet and service usage. Yeah, and let's discuss how private endpoints are better than service endpoints. Yeah, the first thing is security. Yeah, private endpoints are more secure since they use a private IP address within your VNet, so all your communication stops there at your VNet, yeah, fully isolating the service from the public internet, yeah. It has a granular control. Private endpoints has got granular controls wherein it provides more of a granular access control, enabling you to restrict access to specific services, clients, or even traffic types, yeah. Private endpoints allow access to Azure services even from on-premises networks, while service endpoints are limited to VNets in Azure. Okay, so now I'm going to open the Azure Data Factory Studio. Yeah, and then let's click on manage here, and if you see here, we have these many integration runtimes, and I'm very much interested in the SHIR on-premise integration runtime that I've created, which is basically an self-hosted integration runtime. Yeah, the service endpoints basically works with self-hosted integration runtime. Yeah, so let's go to one of the existing link services, which basically makes a connection to the Azure storage. Yeah, if you see here, I'm using the self-hosted integration runtime, and then I'm trying to connect to the storage account, JB ADB storage account. Yeah. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to first show you that I'm not able to connect to the storage account, and then we will create a service endpoint for the communication this time and see how it works. Let's head to the storage account. Yeah, so the storage account that I'm going to use is JB ADB storage, which I showed you from the link services. Let's go to the networking. Yeah, and if you see here, it is all disabled. Yeah, and now if you look at the private endpoint connections, I've removed it all over. Yeah, so for the previous demo, whatever private endpoints I've created, I've removed that. The main reason why I removed those is like private endpoints always takes precedence over service endpoint. That is, if you have private endpoint and also a service endpoint, all your services will basically utilize private endpoint. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. It's you shouldn't be having both, and you shouldn't be thinking like your services are using service endpoint. It's a very clear understanding that private endpoint always takes precedence over the service endpoint. So that is something that you need to keep in mind. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this firewall and virtual networks. Yeah. And if you look at this, SHIR on-premise integration runtime, it basically utilizes a node called SHIR1. Yeah, so what I'm going to do, I will look at this particular VM and then see what is the VNet that we are using. Okay, so if you see here, the virtual network is SHIR1-VNet and the subnet is default. Yeah, let's keep this in mind, and then let's configure the service endpoint here. Yeah. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this enable from selected virtual networks and IP address. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to add existing virtual network here. Yeah. So now I've selected the required subscription. I'm going to select the virtual network. In my case, I know it is SHIR1. So let's select that. Now it is selected. Now let's select the uh, endpoint here. Okay. So now if you see here, it basically tells that the following networks don't have service endpoint enabled for Microsoft storage. Microsoft.storage enabling access will take up to 15 minutes to complete. After starting this operation, it is safe to leave and return later if you don't wish to wait. Yeah, so it is basically telling it's better to start this operation than waiting on here. Yeah, so now what I'm going to do, it's basically this is what we need to do. So now what I'll do is like let's head to the storage account. Sorry, let's head to the subnet default, and then let's work on that further. That is, let's go to this VNet here. Yeah, so we have the VNet here. Let's go to the subnet. We know that default is the subnet that we are looking for. Yeah, so click on that. Now, if you see here, um, scroll down, and then you will see something called service endpoints. Yeah. So what you need to do, you need to enable this Microsoft dot storage. Yeah. Let's select that. Microsoft dot storage is enabled. Now click on save. Let's wait for it to complete. Yeah. So in case if you do it here, you basically have to enable it and then you will have to wait for it. But instead, let's provision it before. So just want to show you guys. So that's the reason I tried doing it from the storage account directly. Yeah. Now, I think like it's better you guys do it like this, and then you do it. It's going to be a little fast. Yeah. So now this is enabled. Check it out one more time. So Microsoft.storage is there. Yeah. Now what you do is like, let's go to this uh, guy here, and then let's uncheck this and then check it. It's not refreshing. So what I'm going to do, let's click on OK. Let's do this add one more time. Let me search for my VNet. And then my subnet. Now if you see here, now I don't get any message stating like the service endpoint is disabled. Yeah. So now let's click on add. Yeah, it is added now. Everything looks good. Let's click on save, and then let's wait for it to complete, and it completed. Yeah, if you see here, we have this SHIR1 VNet added to the firewalls and virtual network in for the storage account JB storage account. Yeah, and we have added this subnet. Yeah, endpoint status is enabled. This is what we are seeing. Yeah, just keep this in mind. Once you open this VNet, any resources on this VNet, on any VNet that are peered to this VNet, all those resources will be able to make a connection to this storage account. Yeah, it won't be a big issue for most of the customers, but there are cases where even this can be a problem. So it is always better to have a discussion, understand if it is not going to create any compliance issues, and then proceed further. Yeah. Now let's go back to our Data Factory Studio, and then go to the link services, and then let's do a connection now, and then see if it works. Yeah. So if you see here, connection is successful. That means like we utilized our integration runtime, self-hosted integration runtime from the ADF and made a connection to, well, that is a communication to your storage account using the service endpoint. Yeah. So we discussed about the service endpoint, how it is better than private endpoint, and where it lacks as far as private endpoint is concerned. I just want to give a holistic view so that you guys yourself can understand what is better for your environment and pick things accordingly. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Jai Hind.